Let's talk about how to pass your PwC interview in 2024. What's up guys, it's Mike from Job Ready English here with another video to help you get hired, bringing you another pass the interview video for PwC in 2024. Yes, the long awaited video is here. We have done more research, we have gone more in depth, and we want to deliver you the very best value for anybody who is watching this preparing for their PwC first round interview. So first of all, who is PwC for people who don't know? Well, PwC is one of the big four professional services companies along with Deloitte, EY and KPMG. In 2022, they generated over $50 billion in annual revenue. They employ over 300,000 people and they have over 600 locations across the world. And they deliver services such as audit, tax, advisory and deals, along with a multitude of other services which sit within those four business brackets. So what can you expect from your PwC interview? Well, it really depends whether you're watching this as a graduate or you're watching this as a professional. If you're a graduate, then you can expect a higher view video interview. This is going to change country by country, and obviously we can't make a video for every single country all around the world. So we're going to break it down into two different types of interviews, which is one-way video, where you're basically recording yourself, or a live interview where you're actually being asked questions, whether that be over the telephone, via video, or face-to-face. Now, what's the difference? Not that much, to be frankly honest with you. If you're having a higher view video interview, then you could still expect 6 to 7 questions, 3 minutes to answer, and some potential special cases which may change, which I'm going to cover at the end of this video. If you're doing a live interview, whether that be video, telephone, or face-to-face, this could run a little bit longer. Could be 30 minutes, could be 45 or even 60 minutes. But I would say in general, it would be really unlikely for you to experience more than 12 to 13 questions. In my experience of preparing people for interviews for world famous companies for now 11 years, it's very unlikely in any interview that you're going to get more than 7 or 8 questions, because particularly when it's delivered live, this process has to be repeated over and over again. And there are some tweaks and nuances to this as you get more senior in your role. So now I want to take you through the most common questions which we came across from our research from publicly available sources for interviews that have been held in 2024 and how to think about answering those questions. And also I'm going to be taking you through a framework for answering situational judgment questions, which actually comes from our Sorting SJT Questions course, which you can find as part of the Pass the Interview pack down in the description below. SJT questions are something that we found a lot of people have struggled with, and it's something that seems to come up a lot for PwC interviews. So during the course of this video, I'm actually going to walk you through the 6-step framework. We're going to look at a question together and how to think about answering it. Question number 1, why do you want to work for PwC? Now, whatever the company, whatever the role, you should probably expect to be asked this question within the first 3 questions. Now, when you're answering why PwC, I always want you to think about 5 fast facts. Now, you'll notice that I already gave 3 of those when I was introducing PwC, namely that they had over $50 billion in annual revenue, over 300,000 people work for them, and they have over 600 global locations. And here's a couple of other facts from our PwC fact sheet. PwC serves over 190,000 clients worldwide. Included within these clients are over 80% of the Fortune 500 companies. PwC's charitable foundation and grant making has delivered over £200 million to worthwhile causes. And in terms of ESG, PwC has begun to have a conversation with its staff and senior members within the business about whether their compensation and remuneration packages should be linked to ESG targets to make it even more important than it already has been for them. Now, these are just a few examples of what I call specific facts that you can go and find yourself. You could go onto PwC's website. You could go to PwC's annual report. Now, depending on the country where you're going to be doing your PwC interview, I do recommend that you pick out facts which are specific to the country. Now this is something that's only going to take you about 15 minutes to do in your research. If you want a little bit more of a breakdown about how to answer why this company, then click the link up above where I break this down for you and also provide a free worksheet which you can print out and write out the answer for yourself. But the main thing is, what we're trying to avoid is just ruthlessly vague answers that could be said for any company. I really want to work for PwC because it's a big, world famous professional services company where I would be exposed to an amazing team and get to work on exciting projects for big companies. Now, you could say that about any professional services company. In fact, you could say that about any multinational company. So try and make those 5 fast facts specific to PwC. And you may even want to relate 1 or 2 of them to yourself. Maybe there's something that they're doing for ESG or for diversity or inclusion that really resonates with you and your background. And that's a good way to add your personal spin onto it. One thing I would say is don't try to talk too much about yourself, what you want, what you like. The company's not that interested. The basic concept for this is, have you done your homework? Do you actually know why you want to work for us? In fact, an audit associate who accepted a job at PwC just last month actually said it's going to be really helpful if you put more research into the company and the role, because you're going to get asked about it a lot. Question number 2, why do you want to do this job? Now, when you're being asked why do you want to do this job, the most common response is, it's a fantastic opportunity and I'd be really good at this and I know how to do this and I know how to do that and I've got all this experience. Where people tend to go wrong is they really don't identify what it is they would do for the job. They don't lay out the daily duties and responsibilities. They don't lay out the skills that they would need. And therefore, from the interviewer's mind or from the Hirevue algorithm, which is essentially passing your response for keywords, you haven't said anything about why you want to do the job. Now, something that I want you to think about is the interviewer's mind is like a checklist of can you do this or objections that they're going to be going through. So say, for example, you're applying for a job to be an auditor. Then in their mind, or in the algorithm's mind, it's going to say, do they have numerical skills? Do they have attention to detail? Have they worked with clients? Do they want to study or even know about the ACAs? Are they good with finance? So essentially what you're trying to lay out in your answer about why you want to do this job is to say, hey, Mr. Interviewer, this is what I'm going to do in the job, and these are the 2 or 3 skills that I think are most important to you, and here's a quick sentence about why I'm really good at that skill. Now, proof is really important because sometimes when I hear people talking about skills, they'll just give a long list of skills. And of course, the person sitting there thinking, well, how do I know that you're actually any good at it? It's like a really braggy kid in primary school who says that they can do everything and their dad is Batman. And you're left there thinking, yeah, but is any of this really true? Because you seem to be mostly full of whenever you talk. So if you're saying that you've got really good numerical skills, provide some proof. What's something that you've done or something that you've achieved that can really demonstrate to anybody that you have good numerical skills? For an in-depth look about how to answer this question, the 2 parts that I recommend, and to download a free worksheet, click the link up above for my most recent video about why do you want to work for this company. Question number 3, how do the company values align with you? Or what is an example that you can give that align with one of PwC's core values? Now recently, this is a change that I've noticed in my prep work with people one-to-one talking about PwC, where we have seen a resurrection of values-based questions. Now, if you didn't know, core values are the core ideals, pillars, or principles that guide each company. And they contain the language that is very important to the thread of how that company operates. They also tend to be the underpinning and almost the answer matrix to any company's interview process. So if you're really thinking, well, what's really important to the company? Look at their core values. The problem that I often find with core values is that most companies' core values are kind of the same. Excellence, integrity, sustainability, and so on and so forth. However, some companies like PwC provide a bit more language to their core values. Value number 1, active integrity. Speak up for what is right, especially when it feels difficult. Expect and deliver the highest quality outcomes. Make decisions and act as if our personal reputations were at stake. So acting with integrity is essentially doing the right thing. This also is a good indicator for other questions that you might get. If you're wondering about behavioural questions, for example, tell me about a time when you did what was right. Tell me about a time when you delivered a project to the highest quality. Tell me about a time when you made a decision which acted against your personal interests. Number 2, make a difference. Stay informed and ask questions about the future of the world we live in. Create impact of our colleagues, our clients and society for our actions. Respond with agility to the ever-changing environment in which we operate. Tell me about a time when you were curious and asked good questions. Tell me about a demonstration of your teamwork. Tell me about a time when you have been flexible and adaptable. Number 3, care. Make the effort to understand every individual and what matters to them. Recognise the value that each person contributes. Support others to grow and work in the ways that bring out their best. Tell me about a time when you resolved a conflict. Tell me about a time when you have built a relationship or supported somebody else. 4, work together. Collaborate and share relationships, ideas and knowledge beyond boundaries. Seek and integrate a diverse range of perspectives, people and ideas. Give and ask for feedback to improve ourselves. Tell me about a time when you've worked with others. Tell me about a time when you've demonstrated leadership. Tell me about a time when you have changed your mind or changed your opinion. Tell me about a time when you have received constructive feedback. And 5, reimagine the impossible. Dare to challenge the status quo and try new things. Innovate, test and learn from failure. Have an open mind to the possibilities in every idea. Tell me a time when you've overcome a difficult challenge. Tell me a time when you have failed. Tell me a time when you have demonstrated an innovative idea. Now I realise as we're unpacking those core values you think, holy cow, there's a lot of questions contained within that. But in fact, very often, and this is a really important point for me to highlight, companies will already kind of tell you what questions they're going to ask without knowing that they're telling you. They will tell you through the job description, i.e. what are the skills that are required for the job, and also through their core values. When you're answering questions like these, what you want to do is use the STAR format, which is situation, task, action, result. Last year, in my second year at university, I was taking a maths degree. As part of my maths degree, I had to work as a team of 4 to carry out a computational analysis of. That's a situation and task. Now in the action, where you're outlining, for example, teamwork, you pick out 4 or 5 key ideals which really demonstrate that you know good teamwork. Talking to others, communicating, going above and beyond, demonstrating leadership, dividing resources. And then finally you would have your result. Now one thing I want to say is that when you're answering questions in a STAR format, make sure that the majority of your answer is in the action. I would suggest 70%. Now we tend to use what we call STAR stories, which is a simple, repeatable method to use the same stories over and over again to answer many, many different behavioural questions. If you want to find out more about what these are and how to do these yourself, then check out the PwC interview pack down in the answer below. One thing that I would say, just as a little tip, is it is highly advisable that you don't try to invent a different story for every single type of behavioural question. This is going to leave you with pages and pages of scripts, not enough time to learn everything or to practice it. And really the most important thing that you can do for your interview is practice speaking out loud. The next 2 questions are examples of common competency questions that we found coming up. And I just want to introduce you to a way of thinking about how you would answer these questions. Question number 4, describe a difficult situation you encountered with your team and how you overcame it. Now, the first thing to point out about this is that it should be a genuinely difficult situation which involves multiple steps to solve. So for example, this could be a changing deadline, this could be a client who has added additional work, it could be an unexpected circumstance like a team member dropping out, but it should have 2 or 3 steps to solve the challenge. Now when you're providing examples for competency questions using the STAR format, ideally you should always use a work-based example. If not, something from extracurricular or voluntary activities, and then after that you can use your academics. That's not to say if you don't have any more experience than academic that you shouldn't use that, but ultimately the best experience that you can provide is one that is closest to the one that you're going to do. So work for work, or work without pay for work, and then academics is not really something that's going to differentiate you too much from your competition. but you use the experience that you have. Now, really importantly, you want to outline the steps that you had to take for solving the difficulty that your team faced. A very common problem that I find that people have, particularly younger people, is they're not very good storytellers. So they'll tell a story something like, we had a team member who was sick, so we just did the work ourselves, the end. I mean, it's not a great story, is it? So you might outline that and say, look, I spoke to Steve, and he was actually ill and told me that he wouldn't be able to do the work for the next week. What this meant was that we had a significant part of the project which wasn't going to get done. I then spoke to our other teammates, let them know what Steve had said, asked Steve to send over the work that he had already done, and suggested that we meet in person with the remaining members of the team to understand how we could divide up the tasks. As a result of the meeting, now you'll notice that I'm really breaking down the steps of the process. Both stories are true, but one goes into more detail and essentially creates a series of pictures that somebody can see as I'm going through. Another way to think about this, and something that I find always really helps professionals when they're trying to condense large amounts of experience into small amounts of time in interview questions, is to think, how would I teach this? So if you teach somebody something, you have to break it down step by step. Much like teaching somebody a recipe as a cook. You wouldn't just say, right, first you make the chocolate cake and then you put the chocolate cake in the oven, because the person who's never made chocolate cake is going to be like, yeah, I don't know how to make chocolate cake. And you're like, oh, first you've got to buy the ingredients, then, well, what ingredients do I buy? Oh, okay, so you've got to buy this. Well, how much of the ingredients have I got to buy? And if you break it down into its simplest elements, then it becomes very easy for you to explain this in a competency question. Question number 5. Tell me about a time you messed up and how you fixed it. Now, something that I know that a lot of candidates really don't like answering are what I call negative interview questions. And negative interview questions essentially give a connotation that you're not amazing and perfect and the best thing ever. Tell me about a time when you made a mistake. Tell me about a time when you had to do something again. Tell me about a time when you changed an idea about something. Tell me about your biggest weakness. And a lot of people will give answers that I deem to be a little bit flimsy or false, or actually are answers that can't really be delivered with conviction because they're not true. Here's a little tip. If you're lying, we can tell. Not because we can tell that you're lying, but we can tell because you look really bored and disinterested as you're giving your answer. Now, for me, it's always best to err on the side of the truth, or just tell the truth, but you don't have to reveal a significant error or mistake. For example, you may have gotten a poor score in an exam. You may not have done so well in a group project. You may have been late to work once. You might have been ill. These are things that anybody can go through, and the most important thing about this, and actually for all negative questions, is what have you done to get better at this thing? And what lessons have you learned, or what lesson have you taken away to make sure that you improve? The reason why negative interview questions exist is because, number one, it really helps us to get a 360-degree view of you, not just what is good, but also what do you think could be better. And number two, which I think is much more interesting in terms of understanding a candidate's emotional maturity, is just to see how people self-assess. We all have weaknesses, we all have blind spots. And if a candidate is unable to do that, then potentially they're not going to be able to do that when it comes to real work, where they're going to have to learn and make mistakes. And this is going to be difficult not only for the candidate, but also for the people who have to work with them and the person who has to manage them. So these last two sections are something a little bit different that I want to introduce, which really talks about the nuances of individual companies' application processes. Now, the first part is talking about situational judgment questions, which is something that I find people really struggle with. And the second part is just special cases or interesting things that I noticed that came up in candidate memories, which I just want to bring to your attention, because if you don't know about it, you can't prepare for it. But if you do, then based upon the role or the country or the place that you're going to apply to, then you can make adjustments and start to prepare for that. So first of all, let's talk about situational judgment questions. Now, situational judgment questions are possibly something that you've come across already when you've done SJT style tests, a situational judgment test, which is basically based upon this situation, how would you rank your responses from 1 to 5, or what's the best and the worst? However, PwC has spent quite a few years now, 2 or 3 years, where basically they have asked people to respond directly on video based upon situational judgment test questions. And I find that this is something which is becoming increasingly popular and people tend to struggle with. So what I want to do with you now is actually read out an example question and then take you through a process to think about how you would answer this question. You work in a large audit firm as a consultant. There are 5 additional members in the team, all working under the supervision of a team manager and the department manager above him. Matt, a co-worker in your staff with whom you share an office, needs your advice regarding a report he is about to present at this week's team meeting. These meetings are led by your team manager, but the department manager is almost always present too. Although the part of the report that Matt shows you seem fine, you notice that the numerical analysis in another section of the report is missing important conclusions. You can tell that this section of the report does not adhere to the standards of your department supervisors. Matt seems to be confident about that part of the report, and you get the impression that he is not interested in your opinion about it. What would you do in this situation? Now, there's quite a lot going on in this question, and actually I find that this is indicative of the types of questions that I've seen on different job-based simulations for a variety of companies. Something that I find really useful and that runs through all of our courses is what I call frameworks. So a framework is just a series of steps or principles that you can use which apply across the board to a category or a type of question that you're going to answer. And this is something that we first introduced when we released our SJT's Sorted course 2 years ago. And the reason why I released this course is that I had clients who were coming to me who had done SJT questions and said that they really were struggling about how to rank and order their responses. So they wanted me to create a framework that they could think of, and the SJT Sorted course is actually included in the Pass the Interview pack. But what I want to do with you today is just pick out a 6-step framework which comes as part of a 1-page cheat sheet for how to think about SJT questions. So this is actually step 2 in a framework to answer any SJT questions. And step 2 is called what's the context? Number 1, who is involved? Number 2, what do they need? Number 3, who gets priority if there is more than one person? Number 4, what are your responsibilities and obligations? Number 5, what is your position and the extent of your authority? Number 6, what is the wider context of the role you are applying to in real life? Now this is a really useful way for breaking down questions and thinking about who's involved. So let's break down the question that we just heard. So the quick summary is Matt's fudged the report, and now it's up to you to either say, yeah Matt, I don't think that's right, or just to become complicit in his error by saying nothing. Now bearing in mind in SJT questions, doing nothing is almost never the right thing to do. Right? You want to be active in your responses. So who's involved? Well, there's Matt, there's the manager, there's the department manager, there's you, and ultimately there's a client involved because the report is for somebody, right? What do they need? Well, they need the best work. They need the report to be correct. Who gets priority if there is more than one person? Well, ultimately in the hierarchy of most MNCs, the client gets the priority, and then it will be the most senior person within your team who is present within the question. What is your position and the extent of your authority? Well, you're a graduate. So you're just like Matt, you don't have any authority over him, so you could say something to him and then really it's down to him whether he does something, but they've already said in the answer that he's not really interested in what you think. And what's the wider context? Well, the wider context is he's made a mistake, or you think that he's made a mistake, right? So how do we go about answering this? Well, first of all, you've got to say something to Matt, right? So first of all, what I would do is prior to the presentation we've been given, I'd ask Matt if he had 5 minutes to sit down with me. I would actually go through the figures myself to double check my thinking around the numerical calculations and to show Matt where I think he has gone wrong. This also gives him the opportunity to respond because he may have information available to me that I have not seen myself. In which case this means that the error is mine, my perception, and therefore the presentation can continue. However, if it proves correct that I reveal errors within the numerical calculations and Matt still feels that this is something that he wants to push on with and he's not interested in what I think, then I would have no option but to escalate this to my manager and to bring it to their attention. I would send them an email, or I would find a moment to sit down with them, and I would then hand that over to my manager to let them to make the decision. Now, ultimately, whether they choose to let the departmental manager know is up to them. But that would be my first point of contact, and also to offer this solution to this problem so that they have something in place so that the presentation can be fixed for the client or whoever it's meant for. Now, you've noticed that I've been quite methodical as I'm going through my answer. I'm also thinking about hierarchy. I'm thinking about not jumping to conclusions, because I've noticed with responses to a lot of situational judgment questions, people really jump to conclusions. So they'll go, well, I'd report Matt, or I'd throw, basically, you know, in the UK we call it throwing someone under the bus. So you'd just be like, oh Matt, you're wrong, and throw him in front of a bus. Now, the point is, you could be wrong. You're wrong. No, I'm joking, I don't really know. But you could be wrong, your data could be wrong, you could get the wrong end of the stick. So really, you need to sit down with Matt and go, hey dude, like, I'm just going through these calculations and they just don't look right to me. But maybe I'm getting the wrong end of the stick. So this is what I came up with. Now, if it turns out that Matt is wrong and he's like, look man, I'm cool, I'm still going to go ahead with it anyway, then you're like, well, Matt, I've really given you the opportunity to make this right. I haven't let anybody else know. I've brought it to you. I've even fixed it for you so you could just put it in. But if Matt is basically willfully and knowingly carrying out an error or a mistake which could have a material impact on other people, then this is the time when you need to go to your manager and say, look, I've sat down with Matt. I've pointed this out to him. These numerical calculations are wrong. I've actually gone through it. This is what the right calculation should be. I have tried to speak to him myself. Can I give this to you? And your manager's going to be like, cool, I'm going to deal with it. You get on with your work. This is now down to me, because that's what I get paid, the big bucks. And then your manager goes and does whatever he needs to do. And that's a really good way to think about answering situational judgment questions, that 6-step framework. And if you want to find out more about that framework and some examples and lots of other cool things for how to answer SJTs, make sure you check that out. It's either individually, it's our SJT Sorted course, or it's contained within many of our packs, including the PwC Pass the Interview pack. Now, finally, there were a couple of special cases of things that we came across in our research, which we really just wanted to point out to you. And there were essentially, for me, 3 things that it came down to. Number 1 was about writing an email. Number 2 was about doing a small case study. And number 3 was about commercial awareness. Now, each of these cropped up in different countries. For example, we saw commercial awareness pop up for the Middle East. We saw case studies pop up in the US, and we saw emails pop up in the UK. Now, for each of these, commercial awareness is really just about knowing your industry, knowing about what's going on, just signing up to some sort of weekly bulletin. One thing you don't need is a really in-depth knowledge of the ins and outs, but just a basic understanding of the movers and shakers and the mechanics of that industry. When it comes to doing case studies, we are talking about a short case study. In fact, in the PwC Pass the Interview pack for 2024, I have put in a walkthrough simple case study, which is highly representative of something we've seen quite a lot with PwC, which is the short style 10-minute case studies with a 2 or 3 minute presentation afterwards. So that will actually outline, as I walk you through, how to answer that case study, what you should say and what you should pick out the figures, make sure that you're really obsessing about the numbers and the facts and removing your opinion. Now, finally, for writing an email, the most important thing about writing a business email is just what are the exact points that you want to carry across. Can you keep it as brief as possible, and also to make yourself available. Guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I really wanted to return to a longer form style format that we originally started out with in 2021. Please hit like, drop me a comment down below what company you'd like us to do next. Do let me know what you think about the video, because of course what you say and how you interact with us helps us to know what videos are popular and what videos aren't. And the more popular they are for you guys, our audience, the more I'm going to do of them. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, I wish you the best of luck. See ya.